everyone, it's Alice and I'm here with our August wrap-up. So in August we were running our own readathon called KETCHUPATHON, and I'm glad to say that we both managed to get all of our KETCHUPATHON badges. I had to read more books than I needed to because I was reading them to Sean as well, but we managed to scrape through on the very last day and get all of his badges ticked off too. So as I share this wrap up, I will share which books we read for which prompts. If I can remember which ones Sean read for his prompts, I might not be able to, but I'll share which books I read for my prompts. And I'll let you know what I thought of each of them. If you'd like to hear our thoughts on Project Hail Mary, Hollowpox, or Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston, those are all in the August mid-month wrap-up. I'll link that down below. And I did read Hollowpox as my ketchup badge and my mayonnaise badge, which was a middle grade and a 5-star prediction. So I've already talked about this one. I just didn't know I was going to end up using it for badges because I hadn't planned to. So this month we were aiming to read 4,070 pages, and we managed to read 3,880, which means we were 190 pages away, which I'm kicking myself over because that's such an easy amount to scrape through. So we got 95% of our page count target read in August. I'm really glad that I've already taken a punishment pick for my September TBR, or that would have been embarrassing. This month I read 1 2-star book, 4 3-star books, 4 4-star books, and 2 5-star books. So the 2 5-star books are ones that I've already talked about, which means it's all downhill from here. I'll share them in the order that I read them, and hopefully you will enjoy this video. If you would like to share your thoughts on any of these books, feel free to leave that down in the comments, and I'd like to have a conversation about what you thought on these books, especially on some of the ones that I didn't love as much, because I feel like some of them are quite hyped, so I'm probably wrong. Without further ado, let's get into it. So the first book I read in the second half of the month was Wicked Little Deeds by Kat Ellis. This is a YA thriller about a girl whose parents have recently been killed. She's moving out of her family home because her family's gone bankrupt and spooky things are occurring. There's a dead body found and then more people die, and she's trying to work out if it might be related to her family in some way, and a ghost story, some mythological story from their local area called Dead-Eyed Sadie. The atmosphere in this one was astounding. Like, I genuinely had shivers going up my spine, and when I was at work and I was going in the morning and like turning on all the lights and stuff, I just had this constant feeling that there was something behind me, like watching me, and it was really intimidating. So this is definitely one that gets in your head, and it would be the perfect read for Halloween next month. So if you're somebody who likes reading seasonal reads, I would highly recommend getting hold of a copy of this one before the end of next month. I ended up giving this one 4 stars because I just felt like some bits of it weren't as satisfying as they could be. I saw the big twist coming, of like the whodunit, whether it was a ghost, whether it was a human, which, like, who that human could be. I'd kind of predicted it very early on, which was a shame because I like it when thrillers can pull the wool over my eyes, and I like it when I don't predict them, but I'm just very good at seeing things like that coming. My own personal problem with it, so it might not be something that you find. You might still really enjoy this book, but it has made me interested to pick up more of Kat Ellis's work in the future. The next 2 books I've read, I've already done a dedicated video on, and those are Heartstopper Volume 1 and 2 by Alice Oseman. So this follows the story of Nick and Charlie, who meet in their tutor group and end up falling in love. I gave Heartstopper Volume 1 3 stars and Heartstopper Volume 2 4 stars because I did enjoy the second one more. I think once their relationship gets going and you're learning more about them as a couple rather than them individually, it's much more interesting. But my main problem with these ones is that I just don't really love the art style. It's all black and white, which I hadn't expected, but it's almost kind of anime-esque. It's a very Japanese style of illustration, which I think a lot of people probably love it for that reason, but I like reading graphic novels that have a more Western style of illustration, and I like the illustrations when they're a bit more complex because these are quite simple basic line drawings. There's not much shading. Most of the focus on the shading goes into like the backgrounds of the scenes, which again, it's just personal preference. It's not my jam. I did like the story. I would prefer this if it was a novelisation, so I am going to be reading the Nick and Charlie novel soon, a short story novella. in the hope that I'll enjoy these a bit more that way, because I do really like these characters and I am interested to see where the rest of the story goes, but I just didn't really get the hype all that much with the first one. I started understanding it a bit more with the second one, but the first one I didn't really understand why everybody raves about it as much as they do. We've then got The Meeting Point by Olivia Lara. This is an adult rom-com about a girl who discovers her boyfriend is having an affair when she texts him and gets a response from his Lyft driver basically saying, hey, you must be that blonde that was in here with that guy earlier. And she's like, no, I am definitely not blonde. I am very mousy brown and I'm feeling very sad now. So the Lyft driver is like, hey, why don't you go on an adventure that I organised? So he's like, hey, follow these instructions, go to this place, go on like a little scavenger hunt around this town, discover all these new sights, live your life to the fullest, enjoy your birthday, because it's on her birthday that this all happens. But by the end of the day, her boyfriend turns up and he says, no, I'm not having an affair, please come home with me. And she's like, yeah, okay. Like, it would be silly for me to fall in love with the guy I've been texting all day, especially because her and her boyfriend have been together for like 5 years. So she goes with him and always kind of regrets that. And it's the story about whether she is going to take a chance on love and kind of go back to this location and try and track down that Lyft driver, or whether she's going to settle for the potential cheat boyfriend, just because of their history together. I absolutely loved the first half of this book. I thought it was brilliant. That's when it's mostly focused on her having this text conversation with this guy, but the second half of the novel, when she goes back and is like trying to find him, it's a case of like, it's so painfully obvious who it is, and it doesn't really make much sense. Like, there is an explanation for it, but it doesn't feel feasible. Like, you don't believe it when you read it, and I'm not into that. I struggle to suspend disbelief at the best of times, but when it's something like that, when it's like, no, that doesn't really check out for me, I wasn't a huge fan of it. I also thought it was just a little bit on the creepy side as well. I was kind of getting Attachments by Rainbow Rowell vibes from the guy, which I gave that book 1 star. I really, really hated it. So the fact that I gave this one 3 stars and it gave me vibes from Attachments is a show of how much I enjoyed that first half. I just feel like I really hope that it gets edited a few more times before it's published. I read this as an advanced copy on the blog tour, but some of it was so painfully clunky. Like, there's a whole paragraph where every single sentence has just in it. Like, if I could just see him, I would just be able to tell him how I'm feeling, and I could just tell him that, then I could just feel so much better. And if I could just do this, I could just do that. And it was painful to try and read out to Sean because it was so clunky. There are words that are missing from sentences. There are incorrect words being used when it's quite clearly like switched in and out. And I never let that reflect in my rating for a book that's an advanced copy, because obviously those things can be caught really late in the game. Unless it's a finished copy, there are still changes that are going to happen. And I don't know how early these e-arcs were put together for people. So I didn't let that reflect in my rating, or I think it would have probably ended up being a 1 because of how mentally draining it was to try and read it. But if I do reread this one when it is published and it's still the same, my rating will be dropping for that, because it's just not polished and it doesn't feel like a very finished story. If you like books about books, this is a good one, because there's a character in it who is an author, and the main character also writes stories. So it starts off with her like giving this couple their love story, and it's really fun way to start it off because it throws you into her character and who she is. But if you're not a fan of kind of predictable cliche romances, might be worth skipping this one. The next book that we read in August was The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. This is my 3rd time reading it. I don't really have much to say about it. It's a 3 star. The first time I read it, I gave it 4 stars. I still don't really understand it. I'm not smart enough to read classics and get deeper meanings from them. There's a guy called Holden Caulfield. He's having a pretty shit time because he's just been kicked out of school for like the 3rd time, and he doesn't want to tell his parents, so he has to fill the time between leaving the school campus and going home, or his parents will know that he's left early. So he goes to a hotel and almost orders a stripper, and then he does some walking in the cold and he gets drunk a bit, and there's some moping and some thinking and some existential unravelling, and it's decently written. It makes you want to read more J.D. Salinger writing. I don't know why it's the 3rd time I've read this one instead of reading more, but it doesn't really do that much for me. I can see why it's a classic though, and it does feel kind of like a YA, kind of like an adult, so it's a good crossover if you're somebody who's looking to read classics and mostly reads young adult literature, because it's an easily digestible one. That being said, it did take us a year to read this one because we started this for Book-a-thon last year, got 20 pages in, put it down, we're like, we'll finish that eventually. Apparently eventually was this month. And I read this for the Worcestershire Sauce badge because it's a classic, so that was literally the only reason that we decided to finish this off, because it's very short and it's a classic. But at least it got us another badge. Oh, I forgot to mention, The Meeting Point by Olivia Lara, we read that for our barbecue badge because outside vibes, because she's exploring an outside area and all like travelling in the car through these like beautiful places, like she's on a bus talking about the locations a lot. So that was our barbecue badge. Next up, we've got The Camelot Betrayal by Kirsten White. I read this for my Salt badge because it was a sequel that I really was not looking forward to reading, and I'm kind of bummed that I read it because I ended up giving it 2 stars. I gave The Guinevere Deception 3 stars, I think, but that was very generous and I should have given it less. And this one, I was tempted to give a 1 star. I ended up settling on a 2 star because I didn't hate it. This series just really doesn't do anything for me. What The Guinevere Deception is an Arthurian retelling where the main character... My light battery has died. Hold on, I need to see if we've got any spare ones. Heck. You know what, we'll just carry on filming. It's going to get a bit moody and gloomy in here, but it's daylight enough that hopefully you won't care. I'm very sorry for the fact that I can't find any batteries anywhere. But yes, the Guinevere Deception is an Arthurian retelling in which Guinevere isn't Guinevere. Basically, Merlin, takes this girl and he changes her memories so that she believes that she's Guinevere, and he sends her to marry Arthur, and then she's a witch and she finds out afterwards that she's not Guinevere, and then Arthur finds out and is like, that's okay. I don't mind because Merlin sent you to protect me and I love Merlin. And she's like, okay, cool. I would still like to know who I am though. And Lancelot is a lady knight, and Lancelot knows that Guinevere isn't Guinevere, but everybody else thinks that Guinevere is Guinevere. And it gets a bit confusing. But basically at the end of the last book, Mordred left because shit went down. Something about the Dark Queen coming back. Can't really remember what happened in the first one, if I'm honest. It was just pretty boring. And this one was also pretty boring. So my problem with this series is that at the end of a chapter, there'll be a cliffhanger. I've been kidnapped. I'm about to be accosted by an evil king. I'm being attacked by a dragon. And then the next chapter will happen and they'll be like, oh, it's okay. They've saved me from the kidnapper. I've killed the evil king. There's no dragon here now. It's fixed. Oh, Sean's ringing now. Come home soon, bye. Rude. Anyway, yes. So, every single time something dramatic happens, the next chapter is just fixed. There's no stakes. You know that when Guinevere gets into a tangle or gets into a dangerous situation, that she'll just fix it automatically the next time. So you don't care. There's no kind of propulsion of plot because it ambles along. It goes from dramatic event to dramatic event with none of them being that dramatic or that interesting, and it's just annoying because there's so much potential here. There's the characters, the interactions between them, I find those really interesting. Guinevere's handmaid Brangien has a girlfriend called Isolde, and they are separated, and in this book in particular they have to go and try and rescue her from her husband, and it could have been such an epic quest. But it just fell so flat. Again, I just couldn't believe the fact that every single thing was so anticlimactic. And I wanted more from this. That being said, I will still probably read the last one because I'm a glutton for punishment and I like finishing series even if I'm not enjoying the series. There's still a love triangle between Guinevere and Arthur and Guinevere and Mordred, and I'm just kind of hoping that Guinevere just fobs them both off and goes off with Lancelot, because there is such sexual tension between Guinevere and Lancelot, you would not believe it. And I don't know if it's me reading into it, but I honestly, if this turned into a sapphic love story and she was like, hey, heck you guys, I don't care, Lancelot, come with me, I'd be totally here for it, and it would be worth the pain of the first 2 installments if that happened. I don't think that is going to happen. I think it's just going to be an absolutely disappointing ending, but there's again a very, very dramatic conclusion, so watch me read the next book, expect some drama at the beginning and be like, oh look, she's already saved herself again. Great. So yeah, 2 stars for this one, could be 1 star, but I'm being generous. Shoot me. And again, it was a good one to reach my Salt badge because I could quite clearly rant about that one for a while. I then read Fragments by Kate Gross for my bittersweet horseradish badge. which is meant to be a book that makes you cry, and this one made me cry 4 times, so it definitely did its job. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. It's difficult because I don't really have any criticisms about it, because Kate Ross wrote this when she was suffering with terminal cancer in the very late stages of her life, and she wrote this as a book that she could leave for her twin sons to read in the future so that they feel like they got to know her, and I can't criticise that. The heart and the soul that she pours into this, the personal memories that make this feel like you're talking to your best friend, and how much I cared about her by the end of this considering I'd never heard of her before. I didn't follow politics. I didn't know that she was somebody who worked for the Downing Street. I just got recommended this from a friend that I used to work with at the library, spotted it in the charity shop, picked it up. I have never read it because I thought it would be too sad, and it did. It destroyed me. As a mother, this was heart-wrenching, because there's nothing worse than the idea of leaving your children and not being able to see them grow up and grow old. And I think whenever it's like a parent leaving their children when they're that young, it's a horrible, horrible thing to read about, especially from a lady who quite clearly had such strong ideas of how their future was going to be. Like, she talks about how she wanted to take them around the world and how she wanted them to grow up as children of the world rather than just like having a small existence. And it's so difficult to read her saying goodbye to those ideas and saying goodbye to those fantasies, as well as saying goodbye to her children. And I can feel myself getting emotional just talking about it now. There is quite a lot of focus on her political life. That's basically the only reason I didn't go at 5 stars, because where I didn't have prior knowledge of her, and where I was very young when Tony Blair was in office, and I don't really know that much about the things that Tony Blair did as Prime Minister, it went over my head a bit when she was talking about the ways that she used to work with him and the kind of African organisation that they've set up together. But yeah, as a parent, I'd recommend reading this one and just weeping your heart out if you want to have a cry. Even the dedication at the beginning got me. There are 2 copies of this book that matter. There are 2 pairs of eyes I imagine reading every word. There are 2 adult hands which I hope will hold a battered paperback when others have long forgotten me and what I have to say. I write this for Oscar and Isaac, my little knights, my joy and my wonder. Like, how can you not feel for this book just reading that description? Yeah, I'm so sad. I think she is so inspirational for writing this while suffering in that way. But if it changes even just one person's life, she's done an amazing thing. And I'm glad I read it. And I'm probably going to keep it, because I was thinking I was just going to unhaul this straight away, because I don't often keep non-fiction, but I think I'm going to keep this one. Last but not least, we have Sean's Salt and Bittersweet Choices, and that is More Happy Than Not by Alan Silvera. So we thought this was going to be sad because it's described as Eternal Sunshine for the Now Generation, and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind made me cry my absolute eyes out, and as I said, I don't cry very easily at things, so thought this was going to be a sad one. But Sean was also feeling a little bit salty about it because he read and didn't particularly enjoy History Is All You Left Me or What If It's Us, so we thought he'd probably have some mixed feelings on this one, which he did. I think he ended up giving it 3 stars. Nearly DNF'd it at one point because it's Sean, of course he did. I actually really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars because I did have some problems with it, but I enjoyed this as much as I thought I was going to, and I did find it a very poignant and a very inspirational read. So in More Happy Than Not, you're following a guy called Aaron. In this world, there is a organisation called the Leto Institute who you can go to, and they can like fold your memories over to conceal memories that are bad for you and memories that cause you pain. So Aaron has recently attempted suicide and has survived, so he is like, oh, like, I've got bad memories but I wouldn't want to cover them up, and he's very much set in the fact that he thinks it's a bit of a con, apart from the fact that his friend went through it to forget their murdered twin. So he thinks it's a bit of a con. He wouldn't ever go through it himself, and he just, it's like it doesn't really exist for the first half of the book because it's referenced in the background but it's not a focal point, and I think that's so clever because there are so many things that until you either need them or have direct experience with them. They exist, but they're like kind of in the background. They're not a huge part of your life, and it feels very genuine and very realistic in that way. But Aaron has a girlfriend called Genevieve, and he ends up falling for this guy called Thomas. And Aaron has to decide whether to end things with Genevieve and pursue a relationship with Thomas. But when he decides to, Thomas tells him that he's straight. So Aaron is absolutely heartbroken, and he decides that maybe the best thing for him would be to go through the Leto procedure to cover up his sexuality and his memories of Thomas so that he can live without this heartache in his life. I'm gonna get a little spoilery now because I can't really talk about this one without getting spoilery. So if you don't want spoilers, I will not be offended if you click away, and I'll give you 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 seconds to do that, and now I'm going to get spoilery, so on your own head be it. Aaron's already gone through the Leto procedure. You don't realise until like 2/3 of the way through the book when all of a sudden he gets hit in the head during a fight and all of his memories like come back, and he realises that he'd actually had a gay relationship with somebody. They had broken his heart. He attempted suicide, and then that was when he went to the Leto Institute, and they were like, look, okay, you are obviously suffering, you're obviously very depressed because you have attempted to end your own life, so we will help you and we will cover up those memories. But there is the risk of these memories coming back. And Aaron has to deal with the fact that he's already been through it once. He still is thinking about the fact that he might like to go through it again. And he is also coming to terms with his sexuality because he believes that he's straight. The Leto Institute have kind of hidden his coming out from him and hidden all of these memories from throughout his life in which he had kind of begun to accept the fact that he was gay. And they've hidden all of that. So now he's got all of these memories coming back, and he's competing with these feelings inside himself where he still believes that he's straight because of the work that they did, but he knows that he's gay because of the memories that have now been returned to him. It's genius. It's absolutely genius. There are little clues earlier on in the book that make you think it might be going that way. So Sean said to me, he was like, who do you think is going to get forgotten? Do you think he's going to forget Genevieve, or do you think he's going to forget Thomas? And I said, I think he's going to forget himself. And I don't know why I thought that. I don't know where my brain was when I was like, yeah, that sounds really deep and profound. But that's pretty much what he's doing. He's forgetting such a huge integral part of who he is because he thinks that it will make him happier. When really, the happiest that you can be is by living your own truth and being your own self and being true to yourself and embracing who you are. And this whole book is about that. It's about not covering things up because of society or because of expectations. It's about not forcing yourself to be somebody that you're not, or to fit into a box that you're not, just because you feel like that's the way that you should be. And, oh my god, the ending gets so dark. I'm honestly still struggling to decide how I feel about the ending, because the first half of the book, 5 stars. The second half of the book was like 4 stars, slipping down to 3. I've settled with the 4-star overall because I just feel like the problems that I have with it are too big. But it's astounding. I think I can reread this one and see a lot more second time around, so I will be rereading this in the future by myself rather than with Sean, because then I can take my time on it a bit more. But just wow. The way that it ends is both dark and uplifting, and I don't know another author that would be able to write that so well, because it made me feel this overwhelming sense of despair, but also like life could be good again. And if that isn't the way that you should feel after reading a book like this, where you've had so much trauma, had so many bad times, but you're dealing with the fact that, honestly, like, sometimes I'm happy. I'm happy more often than I'm not happy. Like, that's a good thing to be. You're gonna have dark times, you're gonna have down times, because that's just the human nature. So it's interesting to see that in a book. And I really did like it. My main issues were the fact that the characters in the background were very stereotypical, and it was a bit kind of on the derogatory side of stereotypical. I liked Aaron as a character. I found Thomas and Genevieve very interesting. The rest of the cast I could have done without. They felt very realistic, but also very stereotypical, and I can remember Adam Silvera's other books having very intimate casts of characters. Like, they only had like 2 or 3 that they were very intensely focused on. But because this is a bigger group, a lot of the characters are very interchangeable. It's hard to get a feel for them. They're just like caricatures. And I'm not a fan of that. But I am a fan of this book. And it does make me want to read They Both Die at the End. And it does make me want to read more Adam Silvera in the future. I'm kind of sad that it's taken me 6 years to pick this up, because I put this on my TBR 2 months after it came out. And it's 6 years old. And I think I would have loved this more back then. It probably would have made me cry back then. It didn't make me cry now. But also it was like simultaneously sadder and less sad than I was expecting it to be. Like, it was darker and it had a dark sadness to it, but it didn't have the kind of sadness that I was expecting. If that makes any kind of sense. There's different kinds of sadness. You can debate with me all you want, but there are definitely different kinds of sadness, and this had a lighter sadness than the sad I was expecting. No, a darker sadness than the light sadness that I was expecting. That's the logic for you. So those are the 8 books that I read in the second half of August. I hope that you enjoyed this wrap up. As I said, if you've got any feelings or thoughts that you would like to share on these books, please leave them down in the comments. If you would like to like this video, we'd be super grateful. And if you'd like to subscribe, that would be awesome, because we post new videos every Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday. So we'll be seeing you again soon in a couple of days, whether you want to see us again or not, because we're always here. Thank you so much for watching. Bye! This month I read 1 3-star book. No.